My name is Mary Whitmore. I'm 31 years old, and the moment my family stopped being my family didn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It came quietly disguised as kindness wrapped in a smile meant for public consumption. You ever have one of those moments where time slows just enough for your brain to register that someone actually said what they said? Like the world holds its breath, waiting to see what you'll do next. That was me, standing in a softly lit garden, strung with warm, white fairy lights, a glass of sparkling cider. Sweating in my hand, surrounded by more than 20 relatives I hadn't seen in years. My cheeks were flushed, my feet ached, and my mind was still running through mental checklists. Food seating, music timing. When my mother leaned in close, her perfume familiar and suffocating. "You're not really part of this family anymore," she whispered, her voice low, almost gentle, like she was sparing me embarrassment. "But I appreciate the effort." I blinked once, maybe twice. For half a second, I wondered if I'd imagined it. But then my younger sister, Vanessa, standing just close enough to hear, let out a soft snort, the kind that slips out when someone feels validated. When someone thinks, "See, I told you so." That's when it landed. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was confirmation. I didn't cry. I did not speak. I just stood there holding the bottle I was supposed to open for the toast, while something old and heavy finally cracked inside my chest. Let me back up. I grew up in one of those families that talks endlessly about unity, but only practices it when it's convenient. The kind that gives speeches about loyalty at holidays, but goes mysteriously silent when someone needs help moving, or listening, or simply being chosen. My mother, Dorothy Whitmore, is the undisputed center of that universe, strong-willed, image-conscious, obsessed with the family name and how it looks from the outside. If you didn't know us, you'd think we were flawless, the kind of family people envy on social media. My father floats quietly behind her decisions, agreeing without committing, nodding without leading. And Vanessa, 2 years younger than me, learned early how to weaponize charm. Sweet smile, polished manners, a talent for making cruelty sound reasonable. I was the opposite, the fixer, the one who remembered birthdays, smoothed arguments, filled in emotional gaps no one wanted to acknowledge. I believed foolishly that if I worked hard enough, loved loudly enough, I'd earn my place. Over time, though, the invitation slowed, the warmth cooled. I noticed things others pretended weren't happening. Forgotten acknowledgments, subtle exclusions, small humiliations wrapped in plausible deniability. Still, I tried. When my mother called out of nowhere suggesting a family reunion, I should have known. She doesn't call unless she wants something. "Mary, sweetie," she said. I was thinking it might be time for everyone to reconnect, a proper gathering. Then came the hook. "I thought maybe you could organize it. You're so creative." The pause before that word told me everything. I said yes anyway. 2 weeks later, I was knee-deep in planning. I booked a garden venue, hired a photographer, designed custom name tags, color-coded seating by family branch, curated a slideshow of restored old videos and photos. I created personalized gift bags for each household, inside jokes, memories, things only someone who truly paid attention would know. I spent nearly $4,000 of my own money. No one offered to help. No one asked if I needed support. My mother simply said, "I trust your taste. Just make it nice." The night of the reunion, I arrived 4 hours early. I set every table, hung every light, coordinated catering, labeled dietary options. Vanessa arrived late, coffee in hand, glanced around, and said, "Oh, cute, very Pinterest." I smiled. I always did. By the time dinner ended and my father tapped his glass for the toast the slideshow had finished, people were misty-eyed, laughing, nostalgic. For a moment, just one, I felt like I belonged again. Then my mother leaned in and erased me, and standing there under lights, I hung, surrounded by memories I restored. Holding a celebration I paid for, I finally understood something that had taken me 31 years to accept. I had never been part of this family. I had only been useful. The strange thing about moments like that, the ones that split your life cleanly in two, is how quiet they are. No music swells, no dramatic exit cues, just the sudden, unmistakable sense that something irreversible has happened, and everyone else is still laughing because they haven't felt it yet. I stood there for another second, maybe two, holding the champagne bottle meant for the toast. My mother had already turned back to the crowd, her smile perfectly calibrated, her posture relaxed. Vanessa leaned toward her husband, murmured something I couldn't hear, and he smirked like he'd just been let in on a private joke. No one looked at me. That was when it clicked, not loudly, not violently, but with a clarity so sharp it almost felt like relief. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to ask what she meant or try to explain myself into worthiness. I had spent my entire life doing that already. So I smiled. I set the bottle down gently on the table beside me, careful not to let it clink. Then I turned and walked toward the house that backed onto the garden, my heels steady against the stone path. From the outside, it probably looked like I was stepping away to grab something. No one stopped me. Inside, the air was cooler and quieter. I slipped my tote bag off the chair where I'd left it earlier, slid my phone inside, and took a breath. One slow inhale, one slow exhale. Then I reached for the wireless speaker I'd brought from home, the one currently pumping music into the garden, and unplugged it. The music cut off mid-song. Outside, laughter faltered, conversations stuttered. I carried the speaker to the dining room, set it carefully beside my bag, and went back out. That was when a few heads started to turn. I moved calmly, methodically, like someone finishing a job they'd already emotionally clocked out of. I lifted the custom table signs I'd designed and slipped them into a box. I unplugged the fairy lights, coiling the cords neatly instead of yanking them down. The mason jars with twinkling LEDs, gone. The photo wall I'd built from scratch, disassembled panel by panel. At first, people assumed I was just being efficient. "Wow, Mary, you're already cleaning up," my cousin Marissa asked, laughing lightly as she sipped her drink. "You're a machine." "Just getting a head start," I replied evenly. She blinked. "Oh, you're not staying for dessert." Behind her, I caught sight of Vanessa whispering again, her eyes flicking between me and the growing stack of decor. My mother's smile tightened. She started drifting closer the way she does when she feels control slipping. I unplugged the projector next. The screen went dark in the middle of a video, my grandfather dancing awkwardly at a beach in the late 90s. A few people groaned in disappointment. "Hey," someone called out, "the slideshow." I didn't respond. I walked inside, disconnected the laptop, removed the USB drive, containing over 100 hours of digitized family footage, and slipped it into my bag. I'd spent days restoring those clips, cleaning audio, color correcting, faded VHS transfers, stitching memories together that no one else had even bothered to preserve. They hadn't clapped when it ended. Not once. When I returned outside, my mother was waiting. "Mary," she said, her tone light but brittle, the way it always was when she needed to appear calm in front of an audience. "What are you doing?" I looked at her, then really looked. The polite smile, the eyes already calculating how to spin this. "I'm taking back what I brought," I said. Her brow furrowed slightly. "But the night isn't over." It was over for me 10 minutes ago. A ripple moved through the crowd. People were watching now. Vanessa finally stepped forward, arms crossed. "Are you serious?" she said. "You're really going to make a scene because Mom hurt your feelings." I met her gaze steady and unflinching. "This isn't a scene. It's a cleanup." She scoffed. "You always do this. You overdo everything, then act like a martyr when no one worships you for it." I glanced at the box beside me, the gift bags I'd just retrieved from under the buffet table. None of them had been opened. Inside were handwritten notes, printed photos, small tokens I'd chosen with care. Vanessa's bag held a dolphin keychain, the same kind she'd cried over losing on a family trip years ago. "It was just a party," she added dismissively. "Just a party I planned, paid for, and ran start to finish," I said quietly. Her lips curled. "You're so dramatic." I took a breath, leaned in just enough for her to hear me, and said, "At least I'm not a parasite pretending to be a princess." Her face twisted. "What did you just say?" I didn't answer. I picked up my bag, walked past her, past my mother, past the string lights, and the people who had watched me disappear for years without saying a word. I didn't look back when someone called my name. I didn't slow down when my mother said sharply, "Mary." I got into my car, closed the door, and sat there for a moment, with my hands on the steering wheel. My heart pounding, not from fear, but from something else. Clarity. I drove home. I wish that had been the end of it. I wish families like mine let you walk away clean. But they don't. Not when they feel embarrassed. Not when they realize the person who held everything together has finally let go. By the next morning, my phone was full. Missed calls, voicemails, messages from relatives who hadn't lifted a finger when I needed them, but suddenly had opinions. My mother hadn't told them what she said. Of course she hadn't. She told them I'd had one of my moods. And when I didn't respond, they escalated. That was when my mother crossed a line I didn't even know she was capable of crossing. She called my workplace. She left a voicemail pretending to be a potential client, then casually mentioned she was my mother and that she was worried about my mental state after a recent incident. My manager forwarded the message to me instead of returning it. Thank God for that. I called my mother immediately. Why would you call my job? I demanded. I was concerned, she said coolly. You left so suddenly. You were clearly off. You told me I'm not part of this family anymore. That's not what I said. That is exactly what you said. You're twisting it, she replied. You've always been sensitive. That was it. You win, I said. I'm not part of the family. So don't call me, don't expect help, and don't ever contact my work again. She hung up on me. Over the next few days, the narrative hardened. Group chats lit up. Passive-aggressive messages turned openly hostile. And then late one night, a message came through from someone I barely spoke to anymore, an old friend of Vanessa's. I'm sorry, she wrote. What they're saying about you in the group chat is really messed up. My stomach dropped. What group chat? She sent a screenshot. And as I read their words, jokes, insults, cruelty, delivered with ease, I realized something that hurt more than anything my mother had whispered that night. They weren't confused. They weren't hurt. They were comfortable being cruel. And that was the moment something inside me finally permanently snapped. Not into rage, into resolve. I didn't sleep that night, or the night after. The screenshots burned themselves into my brain in a way no amount of rationalizing could undo. I kept seeing their words, even when my eyes were closed, how easily they laughed at me, how casually they reduced years of effort to attention-seeking theatrics, how comfortable they were turning me into a punchline once I was out of the room. It wasn't just that they didn't appreciate me, it was that they enjoyed tearing me down. That realization changed everything. By morning, my phone was vibrating nonstop. I didn't answer it. I didn't open messages. I let the notifications stack up like evidence in a case I already knew the verdict for. When you grow up in a family like mine, you learn early that silence makes them uneasy. They need engagement to keep control. Without it, they start scrambling. The group chat messages relayed secondhand by sympathetic cousins followed a familiar pattern. First came concern. We're just worried about Mary. Then came correction. She misunderstood what Mom meant. Then came condemnation. She overreacted and embarrassed everyone. And finally, character assassination. She's always been unstable. My mother never once admitted what she said. Instead, she refined the story, sanding down the sharp edges until it sounded reasonable, even generous. According to her, I'd misinterpreted an emotional comment. I'd stormed off dramatically. I'd made everyone uncomfortable. Vanessa was more direct. She didn't bother pretending concern. She told people I'd been difficult for years, that I'd changed, that success in the city had made me arrogant, that I thought I was better than everyone else. The irony of that almost made me laugh. What hurt more than the lies was how quickly people accepted them, how easy it was for relatives who had watched me show up year after year to nod along and decide I was the problem. It confirmed what I'd been afraid of for a long time, that my place in the family had never been earned through love, only tolerated through usefulness. When I stopped being useful, I became disposable. A few days later, my mother sent a text I didn't open. Then another. Then a voicemail I deleted without listening to. I knew her voice too well. I knew the rhythm of her apologies when she wasn't actually apologizing. The "I'm sorry you feel that way" tone. The careful absence of responsibility. The only reason I finally confronted her at all was because of my job. The voicemail she left pretending to be a client replayed in my head like a threat disguised as concern. That wasn't maternal instinct. That was control. That was punishment for stepping out of line. I realized then that if I didn't draw a hard boundary, she would keep finding ways to punish me for refusing to play my role. So I blocked her number. Vanessa's too. Then my father's after he sent a single message that read, "Your mother is very upset. This didn't need to get so big." That was the moment I understood that no one was coming to defend me. Not him, not anyone. The next blow came quietly the way the worst ones always do. A woman I barely remembered. Someone who'd once been close to Vanessa sent me a private message. She'd seen the group chat screenshots and felt guilty staying silent. "I thought you should know," she wrote. "They've been saying things about you for years, not just now." She attached more screenshots. Scrolling through them felt like watching a slow-motion car crash. Old jokes, old comments, subtle digs I'd never been meant to see. My coming out reduced to a personality flaw, my generosity reframed as manipulation, my emotions mocked behind my back while I was still sending birthday gifts and helping with expenses. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone heavy in my hands, and felt something inside me finally go still. Not numb, clear. All those years, I thought I was fixing things. I was just giving them material. All my effort had done was make it easier for them to justify using me. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I opened my laptop instead. I started listing things, not emotionally, factually, dates, amounts, hours, favors, projects, money I'd spent, work I'd done, times I'd stepped in when no one else would. I titled the document something half joking, half deadly, serious, The Reckoning. It wasn't about revenge yet. I didn't even know what I wanted. All I knew was that I was done letting them rewrite history. Done letting them define me as the problem while they hid behind politeness and blood ties. For the first time, I wasn't asking, why did they do this? I was asking, what am I going to do next? The answer didn't come right away. What came instead was exhaustion. A deep, bone-heavy exhaustion that settled over me in the weeks that followed. The messages slowed, then stopped. The silence that replaced them wasn't peaceful, it was hollow. Like standing in a house after everyone's moved out, the furniture gone, but the echoes still clinging to the walls. I stopped taking care of myself without really meaning to. Meals became optional. Exercise disappeared. Dishes piled up. My apartment started to look like my mind felt unattended. I told myself I was fine. I wasn't. And if it weren't for the people who actually loved me, the ones who didn't share my last name, I don't know how long I would have stayed stuck there. Because losing your family doesn't feel like a breakup. It feels like mourning something that's still technically alive, still walking around, still telling the world they love you, just not enough to treat you like a human being. The silence should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like freefall. There were no more group chats lighting up my phone, no half-hearted apologies, followed by sharper accusations, no new screenshots arriving to peel back another layer of rot. Just nothing. Days stretched into weeks, each one blurring into the next until time stopped feeling like something I was moving through and started feeling like something that was happening to me. I slept late, not because I was rested, but because waking up meant thinking again. My apartment stayed dim curtains, half-drawn dishes stacked in the sink like a quiet accusation. The decor I'd brought home from the reunion boxes of fairy lights unused. Centerpieces, printed signs, sat untouched in the corner. A physical reminder of how much effort I'd poured into something that had already decided to reject me. Some nights I'd lie on the couch staring at the ceiling, replaying it all. My mother's voice, Vanessa's smirk, the way everyone else looked away. I kept asking myself the same question over and over until it lost meaning. Was it really that easy for them to erase me? The answer never changed. Yes, I didn't tell anyone how bad it got. Not my friends. Not even Daniel, my boyfriend. Though he could tell something was wrong the moment I stopped answering his calls with my usual energy. Daniel wasn't loud or dramatic. He didn't push. He just showed up, left groceries in my fridge, sent me reminders to eat, sat beside me in silence when I didn't have words. He loved me without needing me to perform for it. That alone felt foreign. The person who finally broke through was Maya, my best friend. The kind of woman who walks into a room and instantly feels like gravity. We met in college, bonded over a class we both hated, and somehow never drifted apart. She had a way of seeing through me that was both comforting and infuriating. One night, about a month after the reunion, she let herself into my apartment using the spare key I'd forgotten she still had. I was on the couch in yesterday's closed cold fries on the coffee table, a documentary playing that I wasn't actually watching. Maya stood in the doorway for a moment, took everything in without a word, then went into the kitchen. She washed my dishes, all of them. When she sat down beside me, she poured us each a glass of wine and said softly, "You're grieving." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was true in a way I hadn't let myself admit. "I don't even know what I'm grieving," I said. "They were always like this. I should have known." "Yeah," she replied, "but you hoped they'd change. That's what hurts." Something in my chest tightened. I stared at the screen, throat burning, and for the first time since the reunion, I let myself feel it fully. Not just anger or betrayal, but the deeper ache beneath it, the loss of something I'd spent my entire life chasing. "I needed them to see me," I whispered. Every holiday, every favor, every dollar I spent, I wasn't just being nice. I was trying to earn my place. Maya looked at me for a long moment. "Then maybe it's time to invest in people who don't make you audition for love." That night, Daniel stayed over. He didn't ask questions I couldn't answer. He just held me while I cried, steady and warm, grounding me in the present instead of the past. The next morning, I made my bed. That might sound insignificant, but if you've ever been in a place where nothing feels worth doing, you'll understand why it mattered. Making my bed meant I was trying. It meant I was choosing to take care of the version of myself who would come home later. That became my rule. One thing a day, one load of laundry, one walk around the block, one real meal, one honest conversation. Not everything, just one thing. Slowly, painfully, I started to feel human again. I boxed up the reunion decor and donated what I could. I sold the projector and audio equipment I'd bought, used the money to buy myself a proper desk chair, something solid, supportive, built to last. It felt symbolic in a way I didn't fully articulate at the time. Then I turned back to my work. Design had always been my anchor, the place where my brain quieted and my instincts made sense. I'd neglected it for weeks, letting emails pile up unanswered. When I finally opened my inbox, it felt like coming up for air. I rebuilt my portfolio, sent out 5 carefully written pitches to small businesses I actually admired. No desperation, no over-explaining, just here's what I do, here's how I can help. 3 replied, 1 turned into a project. That project led to another. By the end of the 2nd month, I had steady work again, and more importantly, a reason to wake up in the morning that didn't revolve around proving my worth to anyone who refused to see it. For the first time since the reunion, I wasn't just surviving. I was rebuilding. And somewhere in that quiet reconstruction, something unexpected began to take shape, something that would eventually give me back my voice in a way my family never could. I just didn't know it yet. Rebuilding didn't happen all at once. It happened in layers, small wins, stacking quietly on top of each other, until one day I looked up and realized my life no longer revolved around people who'd decided I was expendable. Work came first. Design had always been the one place where I didn't have to explain myself. Colors made sense, structure made sense, story made sense. And once I allowed myself to disappear into it again, the fog in my head started to thin. 1 client turned into 3. 3 turned into 4. I raised my rates for the first time in years, half expecting someone to argue with me, to tell me I wasn't worth it. No one did. They paid. Some even thanked me for my clarity. That shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. I started sharing my work online, not polished performative posts, just honest before and after shots. Branding projects for small shops, visual guides for nonprofits, designs that told stories instead of screaming for attention. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine. People noticed. One afternoon, an email landed in my inbox from a local arts nonprofit running a citywide creative campaign. They were spotlighting designers whose work focused on storytelling and community work that connected instead of sold. We've been following your recent projects, the email read. Your style feels human. Would you be interested in collaborating on our summer series? I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying yes. That campaign changed everything. My designs showed up on banners downtown, in gallery windows, on printed materials passed out to thousands of people. Suddenly, clients weren't just hiring me to make things look good, they wanted me to help them say something real. I was interviewed for a small local podcast. The host called me a designer who sees people. I laughed when I heard it. For most of my life, all I'd wanted was for my own family to see me. Now, strangers did. Daniel celebrated every milestone with me in his quiet way, cooking dinner. When I landed a new client, reminding me to take breaks, holding my hand when the work felt overwhelming. There was no competition in his support, no need to center himself. He didn't love me because of what I did for him. He loved me because of who I was. That realization settled into me slowly like warmth after a long cold. My family, meanwhile, hovered at the edges of my life like a bad memory. An aunt would text something vague. Hope you're doing okay. Miss you at Sunday dinners. I never replied. Vanessa posted photos from the reunion on social media, carefully cropped to remove any trace of my decorations captioned, "Family is everything." So grateful for unconditional love. I stared at that word unconditional longer than I should have. Then, in early spring, a letter arrived. Not an email, not a text. A physical letter written on floral stationery I recognized instantly. My mother had used the same pattern for graduation cards years ago. My hands were steady as I opened it. "Mary," it began. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted to write anyway. Things haven't felt the same since the reunion. I miss you. I shouldn't have said what I said, it came out wrong. I was emotional. Vanessa misses you too, even if she doesn't say it. I hope we can talk soon. Love, Mom." No apology, no ownership, just it came out wrong. I folded the letter carefully and slid it into a drawer I no longer opened. Because here was the truth my family didn't understand yet. By pushing me out, they hadn't punished me. They'd freed me. I wasn't chasing approval anymore. I wasn't trying to earn affection by being useful, agreeable, endlessly forgiving. I was living on my own terms, working, loving, existing, without waiting for permission. But freedom does something else too. It clears your vision. And once the grief faded, once the pain dulled, enough to stop dominating every thought, all that was left was clarity. I saw the pattern for what it was. The years of unpaid labor, the way my generosity had been normalized and then weaponized against me. The smear campaign that only worked because I stayed silent. I didn't want an apology anymore. I wanted acknowledgement. And if they weren't willing to give it to me willingly, I was done protecting them from the truth. That was when I reopened the spreadsheet. I didn't open the spreadsheet with rage. That surprised me. I opened it with the same mindset I used for work. Focused, detached, methodical. Anger burns too hot to sustain anything useful. What I felt now was colder, steadier. This wasn't about lashing out. It was about balance. I titled the document, The Reckoning. Half as a joke, half because naming something gives it shape. Then I started filling it in. Dates, projects, hours, materials. Every favor I'd ever brushed off as no big deal suddenly became very big when laid out in black and white. Custom wedding invitations for Vanessa design revisions, print coordination. 36 hours, never paid. Memorial slideshow for my grandfather, over 100 hours of scanning, restoring, editing footage no one else had bothered to preserve. Church gala flyer my mother submitted under her own name. Emergency expenses I'd covered because someone forgot their card or just needed help until Friday. Line by line, the total climbed. Just under $11,000. That number didn't even include the emotional labor, the planning, the smoothing, the constant availability. But this wasn't about reclaiming money. Not really. It was about proving something to myself first I hadn't imagined it. I hadn't exaggerated. I hadn't been dramatic. I had been used. Around the same time, through my work with the arts nonprofit, I met Sabrina, a journalist who ran an online magazine focused on community stories, especially those dealing with gaslighting, family estrangement, and reclaiming identity. We talked at a gallery opening casual at first, until she asked how I got into storytelling-centered design. I told her a sanitized version of the reunion. Nothing theatrical, just facts. She stared at me when I finished. They actually said you're not part of the family, after you planned everything. Yes. And they let you leave like that? Yes. They laughed. I nodded. She didn't hesitate. You need to write this. I don't want it to be a pity piece, I said immediately. It won't be, she replied. Not if you tell it the way you just did, and you don't have to name anyone. But there are so many people who think they're crazy for being hurt by this kind of quiet cruelty. Your story could help. I went home that night and opened a blank document. I didn't just write about the reunion. I wrote about childhood, about living in a house where appearances mattered more than feelings, about being told I was too sensitive when I cried, about learning early that love came with conditions, and those conditions were always changing, about coming out and watching the warmth fade slowly, politely, until it was gone. I wrote about giving, about hoping, about believing effort could substitute for acceptance. It took weeks to get the tone right, honest without begging, clear without cruelty. When I finally sent it to Sabrina, she published it under a pseudonym. The Ghost at the Family Table. I didn't promote it. I didn't share it on my main account. I told myself it was just something I needed to put into the world and let go. The internet disagreed. Within days, the piece was everywhere. Thousands of shares, hundreds of comments. People telling their own stories about families who erased them, about grief that came not from death, but from being alive and unwanted. A well-known self-help influencer reposted it with the caption, "If you've ever wondered what silent cruelty looks like, read this." Messages poured in from strangers. One woman said she read it sitting in her car after a fight with her mother because she wasn't ready to go home. Another said it gave her the courage to finally block her manipulative brother. Then someone from my hometown shared it. That's when the silence cracked. My cousin Jared, one of the few relatives I'd always thought of as decent, texted me a screenshot. "Is this you? My friend just posted this, and I swear it sounds like what happened at the reunion." I replied with a single shrug emoji. He called me immediately. "I'm not judging you," he said quickly. "I just need to know. Did you write this?" "I wrote a story," I said. I didn't say it was about anyone specific. He was quiet for a moment. "Then I always thought what they did to you was messed up. I just Didn't know it was that bad. I'm sorry I didn't say anything that night. That apology, small, late, imperfect, did something unexpected. It lit a spark. Once one person on the inside admitted it, others followed. Over the next few weeks, messages trickled in from cousins I barely knew. Some were careful, some were blunt. All of them carried the same theme. We saw it. We didn't realize how deep it went. We're sorry. Then Vanessa's former college roommate reposted the article and tagged me publicly. So much for anonymity. I didn't stop it. By then, I didn't need to. The truth had momentum, and I'd learned something important when people finally see the pattern. Gaslighting loses its power. Still, validation wasn't the end game. Accountability was. That's when I opened my cloud storage and pulled up the photos from the reunion, hundreds of them. I hadn't looked at them since that night. Now I studied them carefully. Faces, body language, timing. And there it was. In a sequence taken just before the toast, my uncle stood behind me, holding a glass. The angle was perfect. You couldn't hear what was said, but you could see it the moment my mother leaned in, the exact second my smile faltered. The way Vanessa smirked right after. It was subtle, but undeniable. I created a private gallery. Added photos of the decor, the gift bag still sealed the slideshow frozen mid-frame. I wrote simple captions. No drama, just facts. I sent the gallery to 4 people. I didn't ask them to share it. They did anyway. And once again, the story my family had worked so hard to control started slipping out of their hands. By the time the photos started circulating, I was no longer reacting. I was directing. That's the thing about clarity. It doesn't shout. It organizes. While my family scrambled to reframe the narrative yet again, I stayed quiet and focused on logistics. Remember the spreadsheet? It wasn't just a list anymore. It was a roadmap. Each line item represented a moment where I'd been generous, accommodating, easy to take advantage of. Now it represented something else, proof. I drafted emails the same way I draft professional correspondence for clients, polite, precise, impossible to misinterpret. Hi, I'm doing a review of past projects and noticed an outstanding balance for the design work completed for your event and year. I've attached the invoice for your records. Please let me know if you have any questions. Best, Mary. No accusations, no emotional language, just facts. I sent 3 emails. One to an aunt who'd commissioned a vow renewal booklet and never paid. One to Vanessa for the baby shower invitations I designed at her last-minute request. And one to my mother for a church gala flyer she'd submitted under her own name. I gave them 2 weeks. One paid quietly within 48 hours. No message, no apology, just the transaction. 2 didn't respond at all. So I followed up. Still nothing. That's when I escalated, not emotionally, but procedurally. I filed small claims cases, not because I expected them to show up, but because once you file, it becomes public record. Names, dates, amounts, context. Suddenly, the story wasn't just family gossip anymore. It was documentation. And documentation has a way of making people uncomfortable. Around that same time, something unexpected landed in my inbox. An email from a church staff member. I vaguely remembered asking for the original layered files of the gala flyer for an upcoming awards ceremony. The church had been nominated for a regional outreach award based largely on the success of that campaign. They thanked me for the design. I stared at the message for a long moment, then forwarded it to 3 members of the church's leadership board. Subject: design, attribution, clarification. I kept it brief, respectful, accurate. I explained that I had created the design as a favor to my mother, that I had not been credited or compensated, and that I wanted to ensure the correct attribution was used moving forward. I attached the original working files and an email chain with timestamps showing my mother requesting revisions. They responded within a day, apologetic, embarrassed. 2 days later, someone from the church choir who still followed me online sent a message. Did you hear your mom backed out of the award speech? People are saying the board found out she lied about the flyer. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt done, like a door had closed on its own. Strike 1. Strike 2 came faster. A local journalist reached out after reading The Ghost at the family table. They were working on a piece about family estrangement and asked if I'd be willing to speak on the record. I agreed on one condition: that my real name be used. The article ran midweek. My photo, my name, my work. No aliases, no ambiguity. The designer who walked away, how Mary Whitmore reclaimed her worth after being erased by her own family. I didn't send it to anyone. They found it anyway. The next morning, my father texted me for the first time since everything fell apart. I read the article. I don't know what to say. I didn't reply, because the final consequence wasn't mine to deliver. Vanessa's husband's company had recently applied for a partnership grant with a diversity-focused tech firm, a routine thing apparently, except one of the advisory board members recognized our last name. He'd worked with the arts nonprofit I collaborated with. He'd read the article. He'd connected the dots. The grant didn't go through. The reason cited was simple misalignment with core inclusion values. Vanessa's husband sent me a message on LinkedIn 2 days later. Hope you're satisfied. You didn't just burn bridges. You burned the whole forest. I archived it without responding. Because I wasn't burning anything. I was letting go. My final act wasn't public. It wasn't dramatic. It was an email, short, clean final. Mom, I received your letter months ago. I read it. I waited to see if it would be followed by accountability. It wasn't. I've built a life where I am whole without your approval. Please do not contact me again. Mary. She never replied. And that silence, unforced, unmanipulated, was the most honest thing she'd ever given me. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. The people who once reduced me to background noise no longer had a place in my story. Not as antagonists, not as footnotes. They were simply gone. And that made space for something better. There's a moment after the noise dies down when you realize the fight is truly over, not because someone won, but because you're no longer standing on the battlefield at all. That's what it felt like in the weeks after my last email. No follow-ups, no flying monkeys, no sudden emergencies designed to pull me back in. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty, but settled like dust after a storm, finally choosing where to land. Daniel noticed it before I did. You're lighter, he said one night as we cooked dinner together. Not happier exactly, just not bracing for impact anymore. He was right. I wasn't waiting for the next blow. I wasn't rehearsing explanations in my head or anticipating how my words would be twisted. My nervous system, which had been trained for years to stay alert around my own family, was finally learning how to rest. Work continued to grow, not explosively steadily, the kind of growth that feels earned instead of borrowed. I spoke at a small design panel. I mentored a younger artist who reminded me of myself before I learned how to disappear for other people's comfort. I started saying no without apologizing. And when I celebrated wins, big or small, I did it with people who showed up because they wanted to, not because tradition demanded it. Maya, Daniel, friends who knew my story and never asked me to minimize it. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had lost a family and gained a life. Every now and then, something would surface, a memory, a photograph, an old instinct to reach out and explain myself. But the urge passed more quickly each time. Healing, I learned, isn't forgetting. It's remembering without reopening the wound. One afternoon, months later, I found the letter from my mother while cleaning out that drawer. I read it again, not with hope or anger, but with distance. Then I recycled it. That chapter didn't need to be archived. It needed to end. I don't miss my family the way people expect me to. I miss the version of them I thought could exist, the one I kept trying to build with my effort, my patience, my love. Letting go of that fantasy hurt more than letting go of the people themselves. But letting go also gave me something I'd never had before. Choice. I chose peace. I chose boundaries. I chose relationships that didn't require me to shrink or perform or prove my worth through usefulness. I chose to stop translating cruelty into excuses. Revenge was never the goal. Neither was punishment. Freedom was. And freedom doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need validation from the people who denied you humanity. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It shows up quietly in mornings where your chest doesn't tighten, when your phone buzzes in evenings, where laughter isn't followed by dread. They erased me from the family photo, so I made a new frame. I filled it with people who never needed blood to call me theirs. And for the first time in my life, when I smiled, I meant it.